Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to session number 210 of Kevin Reads A Course in Miracles. Today, we are in chapter 27, entitled The Healing of the Dream. And we will concentrate on section number 3, Roman numeral 3, entitled Beyond All Symbols. All right, on page 572 in the text. All right, this section begins with the love that was coming through Helen Schuckman, taking the form of logic. All right. Helen was, a logical person. Let's just put it that way. So this is a logical paragraph here, and it goes on until we get to the message in different words. Okay, if I haven't confused you enough, let's begin. Beyond all symbols, paragraph 1. Power cannot oppose, for opposition would weaken it, and weakened power is a contradiction in ideas. Weak strength is meaningless, and power used to weaken is employed to limit, and therefore it must be limited and weak, because this is its purpose. Power is unopposed to be itself. No weakness can intrude on it without changing it into something it is not. To weaken is to limit, and to impose an opposite that contradicts the concept that it attacks. And by this does it join to the idea of something it is not, and make it unintelligible. Who can understand a double concept such as weakened power or hateful love? Okay. So power cannot oppose, for opposition would weaken it. And just picture it. The image that comes up for me is that you're trying to keep a door closed and someone on the other side is trying to open it. All right? So your power is keeping the door closed. But the opposition to that is weakening your power, because you have to keep applying the power, and something else is coming against it. Opposition weakens the power. All right? And weakened power is a contradiction in ideas. All right? So let's just take the oneness as an idea of the power. Okay? To think of individuality is to oppose the oneness and to weaken it. So we think. But weakened power is a contradiction in ideas. Weak strength is meaningless. Right? So he's going to get to the point where he's telling us the ego is meaningless. The ego thinks it's strong. The ego thinks it's opposing the oneness. Right? But it's a weakened power. It's a contradiction in ideas. Weak strength is meaningless, and the power used to weaken is employed to limit. He says, so the ego thinks it's going to imitate God and be unlimited, but it limits itself. All right? Besides being meaningless. All right? He says, power is unopposed to be itself. So let's substitute the word God or oneness or reality, right, for the word power. These things are unopposed in order to be themselves. Anything else tries to change them into something they are not. Okay. To weaken is to limit. All right, so no weakness can intrude on this power. No weakness, no thought of individuality, no thought of separation can intrude upon the reality. It can't intrude upon the oneness. Right? So, power is unopposed. No weakness can intrude on it without changing it into something it is not. So the thought of separation cannot intrude upon the oneness without changing it into something it is not. Right. Us. Right. To weaken is to limit and impose an opposite that contradicts the concept it attacks. So it imposes an opposite and it contradicts the concept that it attacks. This self contradicts the oneness. Right? And by this does it join to the idea of something it is not. So this is a something that I really am not. All right. I am not an individual. I am part of the oneness. Kevin, the personality, the body, is a symbol of the separation. Okay. My true spirit is part of the oneness. So who can understand a double concept such as weakened power or hateful love? Right. He's trying to say the ego thought system is really unintelligible. Right. You can't really understand it. You can get mixed up with it, right, and believe it, but it's just not true. So paragraph 2, you have decided that your brother is a symbol for hateful love. That unintelligible concept. Right? You have decided your brother is a symbol for hateful love, a weakened power, and above all, a living death. And so he has no meaning to you, for he stands for what is meaningless. He represents a double thought, where half is canceled out by the remaining half. Yet even this is quickly contradicted by the half it canceled out. And so they're both gone. And now he stands for nothing. Symbols which but represent ideas that cannot be, must stand for empty space and nothingness. Yet nothingness and empty space cannot be interference. What can interfere with the awareness of reality is the belief that there is something else. So in other words, we have these ego thoughts that we can oppose the power, right? Fight the power. With Flavor Flav. All right. We believe we can oppose the power. We believe we can be these individuals. Right? But she's is saying these concepts are actually meaningless. Right? Because sometimes you're loving, sometimes you're angry, you're hateful. Sometimes you're Spirituality is strong, sometimes it's weak. All right? He says these are double concepts of yourself. All right? And you're living, but you're dying at the same time. All right? You're headed there, remember. And that's the condition of believing. All right? He says everything cancels everything out. He said, you know, all these double concepts, they cancel one another out. Love and hate, life and death. He says symbols which but represent ideas that cannot be. So you can't be loving and hateful at the same time. All right? You can't be living and dead at the same time. Except in movies. All right? So he says these are symbols which represent ideas that cannot be. And they must stand for empty space and nothingness. So they must be nothing. And in actuality, empty space. All right. Yet nothingness and empty space cannot be interference. All right. So this can't be interference with the power of reality. He says, but what does interfere with reality and the awareness of who you really are is believing that there is something there, believing that there is something here, right? And there are other some things out there, and the world is filled with some things, right? 10,000 things, as the Chinese would say. My Tai Chi teacher, decades ago, would begin the form by saying, breathe in, breathe out, and give birth to 10,000 things, which is the world. So, and Jesus says this presents a so-called interference to reality because we believe it. He says, what can interfere with the awareness of reality is the belief that there is something there. Right? That's the bottom line. I believe I separated. I believe I projected out into this world. I believe I'm here. And that's what we're trying to undo. Right? The Course in Miracles is a process of undoing these beliefs. Right? You don't rip the rug out from underneath yourself. Jesus doesn't tear the tablecloth off the set table, okay? We do it piecemeal, bit by bit, so it's not so frightening, because the thought of who you really are is potentially frightening. Ram Dass said in every spiritual path, that's the scariest moment. When you reach that point when you're about to realize that this is not who you are. All right? And your reality is an abstract awareness. All right? But what interferes with that awareness is the belief that there is something there. The symbols. All right? Symbols stand for something else, right? So paragraph 3. The picture of your brother that you see means nothing. There is nothing to attack or to deny, to love or hate, or to endow with power, or to see as weak. The picture has been wholly canceled out because it symbolized a contradiction that canceled out the thought it represents. Thus, the picture has no cause at all. Who can perceive an effect without a cause? What can the causeless be but nothingness? The picture of your brother that you see is wholly absent and has never been. Let then the empty space it occupies be recognized as vacant, and the time devoted to its seeing be perceived as idly spent, a time unoccupied. All right. So we could put all these symbols on the others, on our brothers. He says those symbols mean nothing because they cancel each other out. You know, he's a very hateful person, but I know deep down inside he has some goodness in him. You know, all that, it cancels it out. Everything cancels out. The hate cancels out the loving part of him, and the loving part of him cancels out the hate. You know, and other things. All right. So he says the picture you see means nothing. There's nothing to attack or to deny. The picture symbolized the contradiction. All right. It just canceled out the thought that it represents. Right? It canceled out that thought of opposing power, that thought of individuality, that belief. Because we picture these symbols, all right, that stand for the truth, that stand in place of the truth. And thus the picture has no cause at all. Right? So it has no cause. The whole idea of power opposing reality is senseless. So the ego really has no cause at all. Right? The picture of your brother that you see is wholly absent and has never been. All right? So he says it doesn't exist. So he says, so there's an empty space. Let the empty space it occupies be recognized as vacant, and the time devoted to seeing it be perceived as idly spent. All right. So the time we devoted to seeing the world, just recognize it as being idly spent. Okay. It's very kind. Paragraph 4. An empty space that is not seen as filled, an unused interval of time not seen as spent and fully occupied, become a silent invitation to the truth to enter and to make itself a home. No preparation can be made that would enhance the invitation's appeal. For what you leave as vacant, God will fill. And where he is, there must the truth abide. Unweakened power with no opposite is what creation is. For this, there are no symbols. Nothing points beyond the truth for what can stand for more than everything. Yet true undoing must be kind. And so the first replacement for your picture is another picture of another kind. All right. So the first 3 paragraphs, Jesus is telling us that, hey man, what you're seeing is not there. And that could be a pretty unnerving thought. All right. You know, Dr. Wapnick once said, he said, you know, I hate to break it to you, he says, but you're all hallucinating. All right. So that's, you know, that can become an unnerving thought. All right. But he says that in this empty space, in actuality, it becomes an invitation for the truth to enter. Don't fight it. Don't be, you know, if you're afraid of it, just keep on asking your higher self to help you deal with it. Help me to see it correctly. Help me to see my existence correctly. Whatever form the question takes for you. So it's an empty space that is not seen is filled. An unused interval of time, not seen as spent and fully occupied, become a silent invitation to the truth to enter and to make itself at home. So just that instant that you just lay everything down for a second, even that instant in which you doubt the reality of things, that becomes the empty space that invites the truth to come in and make itself at home. Okay? You know, poetically, you know, Leonard Cohen said there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And when we just doubt the reality of what we're seeing for an instant, that's the empty space. And it's an invitation to truth. It's an invitation for the light to come in and make itself at home. All right. And he says no preparation can be made. All right. No preparation can be made that would enhance the invitation's real appeal. All right. So you don't have to prepare for the truth. It's just that opening yourself up to it is it. All right. For what you leave as vacant, God will fill. And where he is, there truth must abide. So the moment I'm saying I'm willing to see this correctly, that's the empty space where the truth can enter, where God can enter, and where God is, there truth abides. All right. And where he is, there must the truth abide. And he says, for this, there are no symbols. All right? He says, unweakened power with no opposite. That's what creation is. That's what you're a part of. In reality, in truth, that's what you are a part of. Unweakened, unopposed power. It's just the power to extend everything everywhere. The power to extend safety, happiness, right? Bliss, abundance, all those things that we break down into the bits and pieces, just so we can try to comprehend it. He goes, but those are symbols. He goes, there's no symbol for who you really are. So it's hard. That's why it's hard for the mind to grasp it. You know, the ego mind, all right, the brain, all right, the conceptual part of us. It's hard to grasp who you really are because there are no symbols for it. You know, in the words of Gangaji, you are that. You are that. There's no symbol for that. Okay. For this, there are no symbols. Nothing points beyond the truth. For what can stand for more than everything? All right. What can stand for more than everything? He says, so that's the truth, as Edith Ann would say. You can look that up. That's the truth. All right. So then he says, so, you know, now that I hit you with that big truth, let me tell you that undoing everything you believe, all right, the undoing must be kind, right? We're not ripping scabs off scars, all right? We're not, you know, we're just not. We're not pulling the covers off anybody and throwing the lights on and screaming, wake up, all right? We're not telling people to get in line. Jesus is not doing that. He says, the undoing of our thought system must be kind. All right? And so the first replacement for your picture is another picture of another kind. So what we see is a world. So then that picture and all the individual pictures we have within it are replaced with perhaps the same images, but we see them differently, images of another kind. So I see a world, I still see a form, but I see it differently. My old ego concepts are being replaced in a very kind way. That's the process of forgiveness. That's how gentle this course really is, right? So true undoing must be kind. And so the first replacement for your picture, help me to see correctly, right, is another picture of another kind. So I see the same guy that I thought was, you know, this, that, and the other thing, all right? I see him differently when I'm willing to just allow that empty space for a second. Let me put down my concepts. Let me question my concept of this person. I'm willing to see the truth. In that little space, the truth enters, and I see another picture of another kind. And the process goes on until that's all I really want. All right? Because the kindness, it just makes you want more. All right? That's a very powerful sentence. All right? True undoing must be kind. All right? Be nice to yourself. You know, in the process of being here, you know, I know people that have been studying this course longer than I have, and they'll do the same things that I'm tempted to do. They say, well, I've been studying and practicing the course for X many years. I should know better. Don't do that. All right, just notice that some kind of fear of the truth came up and you were, you know, projecting, or whatever it is, and now you're projecting onto yourself. All right, just ask, put those concepts down for a moment. Allow that empty space to be filled with truth. time is silly anyway. I've been studying this course for 30 years. Well, what is that? That's an illusion. All right? It's only 30 years because you believe in years. Yet undoing that belief has to be kind. You can't just abruptly stop and say, well, I don't believe in time anymore. All right, let's not complicate things any more than they are. Paragraph 5. As nothingness cannot be pictured, so there is no symbol for totality. Reality is ultimately known without a form, unpictured and unseen. Forgiveness is not yet a power known as wholly free of limits. Yet it sets no limits you have chosen to impose. Forgiveness is the means by which the truth is represented temporarily. It lets the Holy Spirit make exchange of pictures possible. Until the time when aids are meaningless and learning is done. No learning aid has use that can extend beyond the goal of learning. When its aim has been accomplished, it is functionless. Yet, in the learning interval, it has a use that now you fear, but yet will love. All right. So he says, look, nothingness cannot be pictured. When I say we are an abstract thought in the mind, he says you can't picture that. All right? So there is no symbol for totality. All right? You can't picture it. You have to remember it, experience it. All right? He says reality is ultimately known without a form, is ultimately known without a form, unpictured and unseen. All right? So how do I get to forgiveness? All right? That willingness to see corrected perception. The willingness to have perception corrected. Forgiveness is not yet a power known as wholly free of limits. Right. Yet it sets no limits you have chosen to impose. Right. Forgiveness is the means by which the truth is represented temporarily. So forgiveness will reflect the truth. All right. Forgiveness will reflect reality while we believe we are in time. So it is the means by which the truth is represented temporarily, while we believe we're in form. And then he says, no, it's a learning aid. Forgiveness is a learning aid. And no learning aid has a use that can extend beyond the goal of learning. Once you've learned what forgiveness is here to teach, then it's done. You don't need it anymore. All right? You know, you had reading books in the first grade. Once you were done with that, you don't need them anymore. So when he's talking about forgiveness, he goes, when its aim has been accomplished, right, which is the total change in perception, right, that total change, that realization, all right, that what he talked about a few weeks ago, the face of Christ, the innocence, you become aware of the totality of innocence, and you remember your union with God, then it becomes functionless. You don't need it anymore. All right, it's like my old catcher's mitt. Yet, in the learning interval, it now has a use that you fear. But yet will love. All right? We still have that, we're still afraid to, can I change my perception of this person? Does that mean he's going to destroy me? All right? Can I change my perception of this and that without being taken advantage of? You know, we still have all kinds of fears, right? About forgiveness, about changing my perception, correcting, having my perception corrected, let me put it to you that way. All right, we're still reluctant. He says, so forgiveness is in that learning interval that now you fear, right? You're not totally down with it, as they say. But yet you're going to come to love it. You're going to love it because it's going to make you more comfortable. It's going to make you more secure. It's going to make you happier, all right, within this form until you realize you don't need it anymore. You will come to love it. All right? You will want to have your perceptions corrected. As Jesus says in one place, you become a happy learner. You enter each day's classroom and you're very happy because you know you're going to have an opportunity to see the truth reflected to you. Paragraph 6. The picture of your brother given you to occupy the space so lately left unoccupied and vacant will not need defense of any kind, for you will give it overwhelming preference, nor delay an instant in deciding that it is the only one you want. It does not stand for double concepts, though it is but half the picture and is incomplete. Within itself, it is the same. The other half of what it represents remains unknown, but not canceled out. And thus is God left free to take the final step himself. For this, you need no pictures and no learning aids. And what will ultimately take the place of every learning aid will merely be. Okay? And words are learning aids too, so we'll come to a point where you don't need them, because everything will just be. All right? So he's telling us in paragraph 6 that once your perceptions are changed, the picture of your brother given you to occupy the space so lately left unoccupied and vacant will not need defense of any kind. All right, so now I'll see a picture of a different world. I'll see a picture of a different brother. All right, or I'll see them differently, put it that way. Their form won't change, but I will see them differently because I left that space unoccupied for a second. I put my perceptions and concepts down for a second. And I was willing for the truth to arise and be reflected. Right? And so that's the image that was left lately unoccupied and vacant. And what you see, right, what your senses report to you, will not need defense of any kind. Right? You won't have to defend anything. Right? Because what your senses report to you will give you an overwhelming preference. I want to see it this way. I want to see people. I want to see the world this way. It will become your overwhelming preference. I'll be eager to have the concepts of the ego retranslated, corrected. And we'll prefer this because it doesn't stand for double concepts. There will be no, loving villain. Right? There'll be no weakened strength. There won't be any double concepts. But here's what he's saying. But while we're still in the form, half the picture is incomplete. What you're going to be seeing, what's going to be reflected to you is the innocence. It's the oneness. Right? That's what's going to be reflected to you. Right? But the other half is still unknown. The totality is still unknown because I'm still in what we call the real world. I'm still in form. The other half of it remains unknown, but it's not canceled out. You're still who you always were. Everyone, everything is what it always was. All right? It's just that what we're seeing is a reflection of the truth. All right? The other half of what it represents remains unknown, but it's not canceled out. And thus, God is left to take the final step himself. And for this, you need no pictures, no learning aids. It will just be. And what will ultimately take the place of every learning aid will merely be. When all my perceptions have been corrected, and there's no more need for perception, everything will just be. Right? And it will just fade into that scene without fear. Right? Without fear or favor or folly, all those things. It will just fade into the next and just be. Paragraph 7. Forgiveness vanishes and symbols fade, and nothing the eyes have ever seen or ears have heard remains to be perceived. A power wholly limitless has come, not to destroy, but to receive its own. There is no choice of function anywhere. The choice you fear to lose, you never had. Yet only this appears to interfere with power unlimited and single thoughts, complete and happy, without opposite. You do not know the peace of power that opposes nothing. Yet no other kind can be at all. Give welcome to the power beyond forgiveness and beyond the world's symbols, beyond the world of symbols and of limitations. He would merely be, and so he merely is. Right. This is what he's leading up to in this section, is that forgiveness, even forgiveness vanishes. You don't need it anymore. All your misperceptions have been corrected. The ego thought system has been corrected. And it fades. All the symbols fade. Right? And nothing the eyes have ever seen or the ears have ever heard remains. Nothing remains to be perceived. All perception is gone. It fades. And a power wholly limitless has come. All right? Who you truly are has come. The oneness has come. Right? The God, The Creator has come. Not to destroy, but to receive its own, to receive you, who you truly are. For they have come to receive you. And he says there is no choice of function anyway. You don't need a choice anymore. The choice you fear to lose, you never had. Yet only this appears to interfere with power unlimited and single thoughts, complete and happy without opposite. Right? He says, you thought you had a choice. He says, in actuality, you don't. And nothing can interfere with these complete, happy thoughts, the single thought of oneness, unlimited. And he says, you do not know the peace of power that opposes nothing. He says, you don't know that peace yet. The power that opposes nothing. There's not even a concept of opposition. There's not even an idea of what could oppose. It opposes nothing. And he says, you don't realize the peace that's in that. That's the peace that passes all understanding. And it is available to us, and it is inevitable for us. Take solace in that. It is inevitable. So he says, you don't know the peace of the power that opposes nothing, yet no other kind can be. There can't be any other power. So he says, give welcome to the power beyond forgiveness. All right, so give welcome to that. Welcome. Leave that space empty so it can enter and make itself at home. Give welcome to the power beyond forgiveness and beyond the world of symbols and of limitations. There is a power beyond this dream. All right. And he says, give welcome to that power. Because that power would merely be, and so it merely is. Right. He would merely be, and so he merely is. Right. And if you're having a problem with the masculine pronouns, that's a symbol, that's a limitation. All right? So take that concept of, and ask for a retranslation. Because the power that opposes nothing would merely be. All right? Allow that to enter your awareness. All right? Because no other kind of power can really exist. And that's who you truly are. Right? You're not a separate particle. That's who you truly are. You, in truth, you are beyond all symbols. All righty then. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to the next session. Bye now.